you're about to put a shitload of boots on the ground, right? In terms of covering ground.
Well, 2 boots, but
2 boots, 2 boots a shitload of times. There you go.
There you go.
But
a shitload of boots.
Shitload of boots. How many boots you go through?
The HUNTR Podcast is brought to you by Deer Grow.
Man, it's almost food plot season, Jared, and Deer Grow is one of those products that has really changed the way that we plant food plots and the success we've seen from them.
No doubt. I've been, trying to plant food plots my entire whitetail hunting career, which is a little shorter than yours. But the minute that I started, or that I realized that I could get Deer Grow back into some of these remote plots where I couldn't get lime or fertilizer, especially in the 50-pound bag, format. Mm-hmm. So everything was changed. I could get into these spots moving forward with a backpack sprayer, and that's since escalated to these 40 or 60 gallon sprayers, and we're doing upwards of 5 to 10 acre food plots just with Deer Grow and having phenomenal success.
Yeah, and with the price of fertilizer, lime, diesel, everything this year, what better way to get in there and grow a successful food plot at about a third of the cost? Check out Deer Grow at deergrow.com. And we're back. HUNTR Podcast, episode 112.
Mm-hmm.
In reverse.
Seat of our pants today. Rocking and rolling.
Yeah, it's January, end of January.
Yeah, hey. Go.
Yeah. Still January if you're listening to this, right?
31st.
How about that? Well, the nice thing is, season's over, but it's kind of shed season. Shed season.
Yeah, hey, there you go.
Jared picked through the shirts and then gave me this one, so so it seems to be how it always is.
When they ask us for a shipping address, I give them my house.
Uh-huh.
And then I pick through them, and I bring you what I don't want.
I understand that. That's why whenever anybody...
I was like, Jeremy doesn't care what he looks like.
When everybody asks, how did you guys run out of hats already? It's because Jared picked 35 of them out already and stored them in his house.
Yeah, this one's we've been going for a while.
You just sweat through them or what?
Yeah, sweat through them.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
It's the only hats I wear. I wear them to the gym.
There's a bunch of homeless guys wearing around sweaty hunter hats. Okay.
The one dude on 31 up here, Jared, just comes out with the hunter hat every time.
There you go.
I haven't seen that guy.
Or is it...
Sweaty guy?
Homeless guy.
Yeah.
Sweaty homeless guy?
Yeah. He's cold. He's like, are you guys going to get tassel caps or what?
Yeah. Hey, it's winter here. How about we get some beanies rocking?
Anyways, it's kind of shed season, so we brought a shed guy in to talk. A shed guy, big woods guy.
Does Steve identify as a shed guy?
I think so.
Okay.
How
dare you assume his shed hunting preference?
I thought it was Steve Shed Sherk.
The Shed Sherk.
Yeah.
Steve the Shed Sherk.
That sounds about right. So we brought Steve in. Maybe do a little recap here about end of season and kind of talk about what he's looking at here in the next few weeks. Starting to get some boots on the ground and maybe shed some light on things that we could all be doing.
All right, let's get him on.
Steve the Shed.
Sure. Steve the Shed Sherk.
I can hear you. You hear me?
Yeah.
All right. Just so everyone knows, I know what a shed is. So
You have one.
Is that this year's?
No, that was last year's big 8-point that I was shed hunting last year.
Uh-huh.
So, Steve, I guess one of the things that we could start off first. Thanks for coming back. We kind of flew by the seat of our pants and we're like, who's around? Well, Steve's either walking in the woods or he's available for a call.
Can always count on Steve.
Yeah.
Right.
But I guess, obviously Jared and I were up there, guess later middle part of October.
It was the third week of October, I think.
Yep. And it seemed like maybe, I don't know, week or two after that, really action started to kind of pick up there. But even pre-podcast, we were saying, it doesn't seem like you had as much activity as you used to.
Can we start there? Let's start with the trip. We haven't even really got to catch up since then. Jeremy and I have obviously talked about it several times since. It was a lot of fun and an interesting experience to come up and do the big woods thing. Jeremy and I hunt our own farms a lot and try to make it to the Midwest. And we obviously talked with you there. We had probably some preconceived notions or expectations of because you have so many pictures of these deer, and there's a lot of mature age class and stuff, and we're like, what are we getting into? And like, it's no secret. I think everybody in camp that week had a tough couple of days. It was like just a 3-day hunt. But I mean, weather-wise, I feel like
it was perfect.
It was perfect. I was like, dude, we got this cold front, and so let's start there. I'm curious, like your thoughts on that week, and then from there we can go on. But
yeah, it was kind of like a roller coaster season. I don't see, to me, everything lined up right. I feel like, there was really, based on time of the year, I know it was a tad early, but I mean, temperature kind of, abnormally somewhat lower temperatures, like perfect conditions, perfect front we had.
Mm-hmm.
It just doesn't make sense why the activity wasn't that great then. And honestly, going back, I've pulled almost all my cards, and it's still, there was some activity then, but not nowhere like, it just doesn't make sense to me if I can put it to you in one sentence. We did have a flurry of activity, probably from like the 27th to 31st.
Mm-hmm.
Things got hot. Then it dove back down again. And then it really never picked up until about November 8th. And then, it stayed hot for about 10 or 12 days after that. But it was just up and down up this way this year. But I really thought, I was stoked for what you guys, as we talked, as you guys were on your way, like I was like, this is just the perfect storm, the perfect situation. And that time of year, it could be near 75 degrees. Like
sure.
we had cold mornings, 50-degree days.
Yeah.
I think the first day you came, it snowed morning.
Dude, he was already in the back of the truck for me. Like I was driving to your place and I adjusted my rearview mirror. I could see his rack back there already. I was, it really, I don't think could have been any better as far
condition-wise.
As a weather front to be hunting scrapes, which is what we were doing primarily. I mean, that third week of October, maybe just October, third week of October, like in cold fronts, we had the rain come through. I think just before that, it's like we were so baffled. I think at the end of that week, we're like, how did they not move? Like, how is it possible?
And I can tell you guys, I've went through a lot of my trail cam data. Only 83 mature buck daytime pictures. Now that doesn't mean like, if a buck's working a scrape and I get 10 pictures of them, I just counted as one, obviously. But 83 pictures out of 170 cameras, roughly from October 1st to December 10th. That's mature deer on a
holy cow!
Cameras. Crazy how bad it was.
Wait, what's the number again?
83 pictures.
83 pictures
of mature bucks
in daylight.
And that's not different bucks. You might have the same buck on there 10 times. I don't have individual numbers, but 83 different occurrences on 170 cameras, which to some it might sound like a lot, but
that helps.
Honestly, it's way
I was
low.
going to say, if you're talking about October 1st, we're probably talking about tens of thousands of occurrences of pictures.
On 80, 160. God. So that's like 2 pictures per camera on half the camera.
Yeah, exactly.
From October
throughout
1st.
the whole month.
Yep. And the night pictures are insane. Like, even when you guys were here,
we were getting pictures.
Lots of night pictures. It's just, I don't get it. I just try to go back and, I've been thinking it over, what was going on up in this area. And, a lot falls back to, like I said, I think the herd health had something to do with it.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe, with the weather that we had, I feel like there should have been some more mature deer movement.
You don't think it was the acorns?
Yes, I think that was a factor.
I think that's it.
Last year. Yeah, that's a huge factor too. And even the year before, we didn't have acorns, but I feel like back-to-back years.
That's got to be hard on them.
Yeah, and even like the buck I shot, there was no fat on that deer.
Yeah.
And that's November 12th. He shouldn't have burned up all his fat reserves by November 12th. So there should have been something left on him.
My speculation would be, why would they leave the clear cuts? You know what I mean? If there's no acorns, like there ain't nothing in those woods. Like there's no browse, at least compared to what's in the clear cuts. And clearly, I think that's where they're bedding. That's where the thickest cover's at. That's where the browse is at. If there's no acorns outside to pull them out of it, why would they leave?
Yeah, no, and I think that's, that's probably a mistake on our part too, is we tried to back off of clear cuts a lot this year because we've been running into a lot of hunting pressure around them. Just everybody's finding clear cuts so easily just over their phone. So, you just hate to be bumping into all kinds of hunters all the time. But I do think there was probably a lot better activity around those cuts. But then again, if you have pressure, then it creates a new problem. But I wish we would have been, around some more clear cuts than what we were.
I mean, that's where, the day that you and I both did our excursions, right? First full day. I kind of walked through and, saw light sign. Then I finally ran into, I'm like, all right, I'm in some big buck sign, and I found, Steve, one of your cameras, and I checked, and that buck had been on that camera, like right at dark the night before. And so it was like, okay, I need to get out of here and come back into the spot. And on the way out, again, looking at maps, I'm like, what was mature timber is now a recent clear cut I walked right into, and that damn buck was bedded in that clear cut with does and a couple smaller bucks. And it was like, I hunted that spot for, I don't know, whatever, the next 3 sits. And nothing, and it was like, did that entire group just pick up and move because I, bumped them out of there? Maybe.
That's big woods hunting.
Yeah. I do think that the acorn thing, because I've seen that even in other places, in my place in Kentucky, in Ohio, like places that, there's other food, but the deer rely heavily, especially in October, on those acorns, and activity revolves around those. It has been 2 years of little to no acorns, and I can't imagine the toll that's physically taken on these deer because of, low fat reserves going into last winter, then coming out, and now low fat reserves coming in. I mean, there's no residual carryover at all after 2 years of this.
Yep, and I do think that has part of it. And I mean, this could be crazy. Maybe I'm way wrong by saying this, but because there are areas where there's no acorns for miles, but yet over the years, those areas can still be good and those deer are healthy. But then I also wonder, does Mother Nature cast this net over a big area and just tells all the deer, you need to settle down this year because we just don't have the right fat reserves, the right food sources? Because you wouldn't think no acorns would affect every deer when you have clear cutting and other food sources in other areas, but I do think it did play a huge factor into that because even last year, the season prior, 2021, was not a great rut, but then this rut was I would literally say 10 times slower than the one before. So especially the mature buck activity. And when I talking about pulling, all my cards and going over the data, 50% of the pictures I had were from November 12th to November 21st of mature buck pictures. So you figure half of that activity was just in a little over a week. And I'm doing a 2.5 month study here. So it was just a short blast, and it seemed like November 12th and November 13th were the days to be here this year. And I know that's just such a narrow window of time, but I mean, we had 3 or 4 clients out that weekend, plus me. I killed one, 2 other guys killed one, a couple good ones. What stinks is the last week of archery season, we had 1 client, because normally I don't guide then, and I tried to guys off and get them to come because I just had a feeling things were going to finally turn on with that consistent weather that we were supposed to get, and that was the best time, and we just really didn't have anyone to take out. But we still got 9 bucks this year out of 30 some hunters. I'm honestly not complaining. But I
was pretty good.
Would have done a little bit. Yeah, that's not too bad.
I mean, I think that if
pretty amazing considering we didn't see a deer in 3 days.
Well, and that's what I mean. They're there, right? I mean, we saw a sign, we saw plenty of sign. We had night pictures of them. I think it just really comes down again, a lot of people rely too heavily on acorns, right? When ultimately, the thing that gets deer through the winter and through the entire year, especially in the big woods, is browse, right? If the deer didn't have browse, they would die. Like they'd be dead. So, I mean, the browse is what is the foundation that gets them through. That said, from a fat reserve standpoint, from an energy standpoint, the carbohydrates that are built up in those acorns is what fuels that deer and really positions them to survive through that winter. And if you think about a mature buck, bigger skeletal structure, more muscle mass, all of these things, he is burning more energy during his movements than, a 1-year-old buck even is. Maybe that 1-year-old buck's running around like crazy, but he's burning more energy because it's a bigger frame. It's a bigger body. He has to consume more food. So, I think when you start to it's not necessarily any more difficult than understanding like, hey, if we're stranded on an island, right, and we don't have any food to eat, like we can't just be running around the island like crazy. You starve. Like you have to conserve energy.
I really thought you were going to say I'm going to have to eat more food than you're going to eat.
Well, I'd have to eat.
I thought that's where we were going with.
Yeah, Jared would have to be eating like my leg at day 3.
Okay, so we're all stuck on an island. Who are we eating first? Nick?
Yeah.
There's not much to me.
Yeah.
You might want to save me.
Yeah. Right. So, but then,
okay, he's going with the intelligence. He's going to outsmart us on this.
He's going to dig a hole. But yeah, that's I think that's where that all starts to pan out. And now put that into a kind of a trend factor of 2 years of that. These deer have to be, like you said, the buck that Jared was hunting, which I think we're all in agreement was a mature deer, field dressed at what?
Yes.
Buck 20?
And it was like a 7 or 8 year old.
That's crazy.
Yep.
In November, right? End of November.
No. Even still,
That's
you
odd.
think that at some point that deer was probably over 200 on the hoof.
Field dressed?
Yeah, I don't know if I haven't really. That's kind of like talking through a friend.
Sure.
But
Got to be field dressed.
I don't know the exact weight, but that's what he said, around 120 pounds. And he said the stomach was full of ferns too.
Ugh.
So,
that's dinosaur
that
food.
just doesn't sound like a good combination going into winter.
No nutritional value there coming through at all. And I think again, it's it's these deer.
Isn't there no nutritional value?
I heard it's got to be on the bottom of the food chain.
Bo Martonic was talking about how he sees a lot of deer eating ferns. Maybe not if there's a more preferable food source, but
especially as you get into the harder part of the winter. It is still some of the only green food that is available.
Is it though? Doesn't it brown down?
It does.
I'm trying to think what else are beating.
Some of them on the, I will say on the north slopes, they tend to stay greener longer. I'm still seeing some green ones in places, but also the roots of them too.
Sure.
There's some carbohydrates in the roots. They kind of look like spaghetti almost. So
yeah.
I'm not saying it's like a key food source because just looking at a lot of the deer around here, like they're hurting. They're I'm not going to say we're going to lose them all, but they're in dire need for a mild winter and better acorn crop and just healthier environment.
Well, unfortunately for them, besides that, massive front that we saw around Christmas that dropped, really significant temperatures, which we'll talk about here in a second in terms of sheds. It's been a pretty mild winter. We don't have deep snow. We've been pretty mild.
Yeah. What do you think, Steve? What have you been seeing? I know you said you got some snow up there. You're plowing this morning, but has it been a pretty mild winter? Has it?
Extremely mild. Even now, like there's probably only 4 or 5 inches of snow. I live way on top of a mountain, and literally in my lawn, there's probably 4 inches. So that's not going to be much of a factor at all. The only thing we really got to watch out for, because there's limited browse in places, is sometimes in a mild winter when it goes like freeze and thaw, and then you start getting rain and then snow, and you get like a bad ice layer. Like we talk about those deer digging up those fern roots and that. And then also I think it's hard for them to get around. Like sometimes these milder off and on winters too can be a factor because it just builds that heavy ice layer and makes it, once again, tough for them to get around and dig through it to find whatever food might be available. But it's very mild lately.
Yeah. Well, we've thought that too. Jeremy and I were talking on the last podcast, I think, about just observationally, like if the winters are getting, more mild.
Mm-hmm.
It seems like they are to me. Even throughout October, November. It's like, it doesn't seem like it gets cold anymore. I mean,
No.
we get them quick blasts. Like you said, we had right around Christmas, we had 2-3 days of like blistering cold.
Yeah.
We had one cold front in November.
Yeah.
One cold front in October.
Yeah. Significant cold front.
And like other than that, it's just been like, I don't know, today's like on
40s and 50s.
Like 40s, 50s.
And rainy.
And rainy. Like it's January.
Yeah. Yeah. No,
I mean, I could be
agree.
crazy, but like when I was a kid, we were getting like
I feel like we were.
which ain't that long ago. We were getting snow days, dude. There was a year we got like 6 foot of snow.
Yeah. Well, that's what I was just looking at the Pittsburgh one. It says like we've had like 9 inches of snow. We should have 21 by now.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, and I mean, you're talking to a guy that plows snow for a living, and I've done this for probably close.
Well, you're talking to a guy that plowed. I'm just kidding.
Well, just a quick example, like the first few years I was in business, I used to have a 3-inch minimum. Like I didn't go out unless there was 3 inches because it snowed so much that people didn't want to pay every time it,
Sure.
you get
Wouldn't
like
pay
a
for
half
3 inches.
or even, it would just add up to too much. But now it's like any snow at all, people pay to have it removed, or even if there's a dusting, because the winters are getting so much milder. And it's,
Yeah.
and even people, not to get too off topic, but they're getting like more scared of winter. Like, oh my God, it's snowing. When
Yeah.
years ago, like a foot of snow didn't even bother people,
I think
It's crazy.
I think that's where you start to see these things happening. And again, probably for fortunate in terms of the deer herd of the nutrition that they've had to go into something. Because if we would have had, let's say, a normal winter where it's highs in the 30s, lows in the teens, and dropping multiple 6 to 18-inch snowfalls and stuff, like these deer would probably be in a world of shit.
Yeah, no, they should be. I mean, they might not be smiling right now, but I'm sure they're thinking, "Wow, this if it just stay like this another couple months, we'll be
Yeah.
in good shape."
Well, and I think that one of the things that's hard too when we talk about these big woods, and obviously there is some private land and some timber company land up there, but again, there's very strategic clear cuts that are happening up there, which is creating browse. But there's also, giant areas that are just more mature type timber and open timber that, frankly, all that's there right now is ferns.
Exactly. Yep. And especially that's why it seemed like North Slopes were really well this year. Because we had a lot of really dry weather in the fall. It seems like it affected some of the plant growth and plant life. Some of that browse was dying off a little early, and a lot of stuff shifted to North Slopes. That where you saw that buck bedding, even though that was in a clear cut, that was somewhat north facing on that side of the hill too.
It was.
Little things every year that Mother Nature kind of throws at you in the big woods. One year to the next is never the same, and you're just constantly adapting to what's being thrown at you. So it's definitely a challenge, that's for sure.
Is there any agriculture up there at all?
Nothing. Nope. I've never, and even for me, like I've never hunted private land. I've never, hunted over corn or, food plots, that kind of stuff. Like this, it's just, and, if I wasn't brought into it, like, who knows if I would be doing this, but if you're born into it, like you just get used to it and you develop strategies and tactics. And
well, I don't.
You talked about,
Yeah, I don't necessarily mean
I was just gonna
from a hunting standpoint, Steve. I'm just even asking from like a deer resource. Like, do you see deer shifting on to, like, if there was any agriculture? I'm sure that would be happening.
Yeah, I mean, nowhere around me. 15, 20 miles away, there's agriculture in places. Further east in sections. Even really in all directions, eventually you get into some agriculture, but you're talking anywhere from 15 to 75 miles away. And it doesn't seem like those deer are shifting that far.
Right.
They tend to tough it out in these areas. And honestly, most of them do make it, but still, I'm not going to say they're extremely healthy.
One of the things that I think that we see in some places, and we were talking about it kind of in this last podcast, is, some of these deer are literally moving, 4 or 5 miles, and I'm sure it's rarities or it's excursions or whatever. But, if you look at the deer in states like Upper Michigan or Minnesota, where they have to move to these wintering yards, like they're literally picking up and migrating, out of some of these areas and into more winter suitable areas. What I wonder, Steve, is you get into some of these places, or even when we have, significant, acorn deficit, basically, are these deer literally, moving their entire home ranges or positioning them different as those, significant changes happen in what would be their normal landscape?
Yep. That could very well be, because there's some deer that, they don't seem to show up this time of year. You see it every year, but then you'll either get them in summer or fall, and you tend to wonder if they learned something where
Right.
they find a food source or the right habitat, several miles away. We might have talked about this before, but that one buck at my camp that I called Goliath, remember those massive sheds I had mounted? That deer for sure traveled. Once again, I'm sorry if I'm repeating it, but he traveled 7 miles to his winter area every year, because where I get him in the summer and fall and then in the winter was 7 miles apart where I would get a shed. So to me, that deer learned something.
Yeah.
I don't think it was some natural occasion. I think he really learned something, that if I shift over to this area, there's better food, better winter habitat. He did it every year. So obviously it's got to be happening.
Well, and that's what I'm saying. These deer are intuitive enough. And again, the goal up there is just to survive, right?
It's so funny to try to perceive what a deer is thinking. Like, imagine like if a buck could hear what we're saying, he's like, yeah, of course, like the food's over there. Like, I know where it's at.
But you'll hear other people.
It's only 7 miles away. You think I can't walk 7 miles?
Like Rising will tell you, they're just goats in the woods. But I mean, some of these deer are doing things that you have to at least step back and say, damn, that deer is smart. Like he's not just, happening to do that thing. Like this deer is moving 7 miles every year for wintering range. Like, he's doing this on purpose for a reason.
Yeah.
Yep. Especially say you're hunting that deer in archery season and then going into gun season, because I know that deer would shift in gun season some years. 7 miles away, you're not even in the ballpark.
Yeah.
From where you might be archery hunting him, and you're hunting his sign and everything, maybe his earlier bedding areas, and you're not anywhere.
You're not even close. You're not in the game at all. And you would think a deer like that too, making that 7 mile jump, and again, depending on where it is, like it could just so happens it's between the close of archery and the start of gun, but something like that, I'm sure he's fairly unfamiliar with that tract in between. Like, he's done it before, but it's not like he knows it like the back of his hoof.
Right.
Every day these things live out there, dude.
I know, but if
Every
he's just
day.
making that jump 7 miles to a new area.
Every day. It only takes us one time. You go walk a piece of property and you know it forever.
I think he's more
They're out
vulnerable
there every
though.
day.
Yeah, maybe. Yeah.
But
You're
we also-
not wrong, though. I know what you're saying.
Yeah.
I can't tell you whether he made a shift in 1 day or 2 weeks, or
Right.
he go in a straight line. Like, still, there's a lot of figuring out to do, and it sounds more impossible, in my opinion, to figure out where he's going to be every day in that 7 mile stretch. So, very unpredictable situation.
Yeah. Well, that's what's so interesting about these GPS studies, right? When you start to see these deer that are GPS collared and they're taking readings every 8 minutes or whatever, and these deer are crossing rivers, or they're literally picking up and moving their entire range, like you said, miles, to where anybody who was like, man, I'm going to kill that buck this year, they're not even in the game. Like, that deer's not anywhere close to them. And until you really fathom, like, this isn't like just a rarity or an exception. Like, these deer, multiple mature bucks every year, are making giant moves and repositioning their entire core area. And so, again, it comes back to, like, you have to feel sometimes you're hunting a damn ghost, because you aren't in the game anymore. The fact that he's picked up and moving, unless you have more coverage of cameras or observation, or somebody talks about him or whatever, you have no idea. You're just like, damn, I can't kill this deer. I can't find him. Like, where the hell did he go?
I think that is one of the bigger advantages, like, of trail cameras, is like while you certainly can overanalyze them, and we we just talked about that, but they are super valuable if you have like if deer are accessing a property from a certain way, whether it's like a pinch point or a drainage or whatever, to know that a buck has made a move that either that you've like experienced him doing in the past, or like he's in a certain wood lot. It's like, okay, all of a sudden this 7-mile range gets transformed into potentially a huntable block.
Right.
And you may not know within this, whatever, 50, 80, 150 acre lot where he's at, but that's where you're,
Well, and that's what I was going to ask you, Steve. Obviously this time of year, and especially entering February, you're about to put a shitload of boots on the ground, right? In terms of covering ground.
Well, 2 boots, but
2 boots, 2 boots a shitload of times. There you go.
There you go.
But
a shitload of boots.
Shitload of boots. How many boots you go through?
A lot.
Yeah, there you go. See? But if you think about it, like a lot of your strategy, I guess, is depending on trends year after year. And now here we are in the second year of not having acorns. In theory, we would all kind of think that next year we're going to have an explosion and there's going to be a ton of acorns everywhere, but we don't know. So when you're walking into this year, like what are you trying to take away from some of these walks and explorations of area to apply to connect the dots for next year?
Well, I look back at where I think, where did I struggle? Even though, I had some success, I'm really more, like I said, trying to find, okay, where could I have improved? And then I go into those areas especially things where, I talked about like North Slopes, they were something that I kind of overlooked. I think, also, we didn't put enough focus on clear cuts. So then I'll try to figure out those things where I know we slacked off on and should have focused on more. And as I'm going through certain areas, okay, where are clear cuts in this area? Where can I find clear cuts that probably aren't getting hunting pressure, like more harder to get to areas? Even that area where you hunted, even though that's a younger cut, but give that another spring and summer to grow, it's probably going to be a really good spot. And that's not an easily accessible area. So, I'm going to look for more places like that, really just kind of honing my edges, improving where I can. I mean, I really can't get to know any areas a whole lot better, but I can go into these areas and focus more on, like I said, where I thought we were making some mistakes this past season and try to get a step ahead of the game more than being a little bit more behind.
Yeah.
But, every year is, like I said, going to be different. And I also don't want to say that, okay, whatever I see scouting this spring is going to be exactly what those deer are going to do next year. It won't be just that easy.
Mm-hmm. I mean, do you have deer that you're hoping that you find some sign of shed or whatever that, you're not sure as of right now made it through?
Absolutely. There's probably at least 10 deer, like a lot of, I don't know if you guys saw this deer I posted today. You probably didn't yet, but honestly, I think it's either a 3.5 or 4.5 year old. It might be probably at least I would say mid 150s. And that's a deer we don't have a lot of history with because I think it just blew up. Like it could even been a 3.5 year old 8-point last year that we really didn't pay much attention to, and then this year it's a giant. So, those deer, those 5 or 6 that look like they got a lot of potential, I want to spend a lot of time in those areas and try to definitely put some pieces together for, going into next season. I will say, it seems like a lot of bucks too. We talked about shifting, like they have like these early fall areas, and then some of them are even transitioning pretty far in the rut and leaving these early fall areas and, spending the rut more in other areas. So, those are some things we got to, pin down and put the pieces together as well. Cause if you're an individual hunter, once again, you want to be close to his bed in the early fall, but if you don't know what that deer is going to do in the rut, even though it's somewhat unpredictable, but still you want to try to get ahead of the game and put pieces together this time of year. Then, going into next season, that's what I'm trying to do.
Yeah. I mean, I think that a lot of people get, I wouldn't say down on themselves, but maybe even frustrated. Like they go into an area that they're pretty sure that this buck has been, you're seeing sign, and like as most will have it, like you don't find the shed, right? And whether that eats at you for the rest of the year until next fall till you finally get a picture of them or not, it's kind of the like unknown factor that just like, drives a lot of us to say, well, how much time should I put in this area? Should I even worry about that deer? Should I be thinking about something else? And I think that's where a lot of people probably are not frustrated, but definitely kind of on edge as they go into the spring and summertime is, if there's a deer that they really have set their goals on and they don't know if it, was shot or if it made it through, how are they, or how should they approach that next year, from an effort standpoint to understand if they should be spending time on that or if it's, hey, it's time to move on and find something else that's going to fill that void.
Yep. And I'll just touch on that, like, to make sure I thoroughly answered this. I like things that I'm looking for, or, any real good active scrapes in those areas. I'm noting them, on my app, on my phone, my Spartan Forge. Also, big sign you're finding. You also, in a big woods situation, you want to find like, where are the mass trees available? Are there any sections or patches of oaks? You want to go in there and do all that damage now. You don't want to be putting a ton of boots on the ground looking for those things come next hunting season. So, make that mess now, and that will give that deer a lot of time to forget about what you did. And then you can kind of just, throw your jabs at them next hunting season, as you already kind of have a feel for some of these key points of interest that you need to be going after.
Yeah, and I would assume that even, let's say that deer did get shot and you just don't know it. I mean, if you're in a prime area, another buck's going to move right into that place.
That's a great point too. Yep, I see that so many times, and that's what's nice is you can count on some areas year after year too. And another thing too that it seems like some of these older deer, I don't want to say they're easier to hunt, but it seems like when you build history with a deer, they seem to get easier, at least for me, easier to stay on, or at least feel like you're in the game with some of these deer, because you get 2-3 years of similar, data and intel from a deer, especially on your trail cameras, and you see them doing some of these same things at the same time of year, and you can kind of build on that next season. But for instance, this deer that I'm telling you about, like, yeah, we might have 1 year of intel here, but to me, it's not as much as what I'd like. Like, are we sure we know this deer enough? So a younger deer, a 3 or 4 year old that has a lot of potential, it's actually a little bit different situation.
Yeah. The HUNTR Podcast is brought to you by Stealth Cam.
Dude, where would we be without our cell cams?
I would definitely be divorced at this point.
Yeah, I hear that.
I mean, the fact is I spent more time checking cameras than I actually did hunting prior to cell cameras. Now, at least, my wife can enjoy me being in the comfort of my own home, buried in my phone, checking those pictures.
Yeah, 100%. And dude, when it comes to trail cameras and definitely cell cameras, reliability is, I think, the number one thing that we're looking for. Stealth Cam just has a long reputation of reliable cameras, and ultimately that is the most important thing to us. They have to work.
In terms of reliability, there's not a better camera on the market than Stealth Cam, whether you're talking about the Fusion X, the Reactor, or the DS4K Transmit. And most of them are under $200.
Stealthcam.com. Check them out.
Did we were talking about some of the trail camera data and stuff that you were seeing. Any other insights on that you can share? Like, anything around like peak scrape activity or anything like that you've kind of just observationally even looked at?
I have kind of like I have a question to like kind of top onto that. Steve, I've never run cameras, I don't think, on scrapes beyond like November. I think at some point I always would pull them and we'd put them on like food plots and stuff. I had, I've got at least two scrapes that like really stood out to me this year as like, had multiple mature bucks hitting them throughout the season. I just felt really strongly about, the activity that was happening there. And on both of them, it seemed like I'm still getting like small bucks and does will come through and hit the scrape, and sometimes even work the leaf underneath of them. But both of those seem to have like really, really dropped off, which I know it's not October. It's not peak sign laying stuff, but it's those bucks that were there have all but disappeared. I'm just curious, 'cause I know you getting throughout the year. I think a lot of bucks still hitting scrapes and stuff. So that's my compliment to Jeremy's.
I don't think there's like as much of an interest outside of a certain phase. I would maybe call it like a pre-rut phase when I think scrapes are, at their best, maybe the mid to late October period. But I do think if that scrape this time of year is kind of in their path, like, if you got a trail that a buck is using to and from bedding, that, it seems like they'll still work that often if they don't have to go out of their way much. Or it also seems like if you have a few mature deer in an area, even though right now they're not that territorial, it still seems like they will, work those scrapes a little more if you have a few mature deer around versus if it seems like it's the only dominant deer and there's just a lot of younger deer and does, it doesn't seem to be as consistent kind of in the off season. At least that's what I'm seeing.
And I would say,
so there's just no deer there. That's what he's
I think one of the things that I can't remember if it was Illinois, maybe it was Illinois. Remember we had that one lease, we had that really good scrape on the edge of Shawnee National, and like throughout February, March, April, like even when these deer, I mean, we're talking nubs, but you could tell like that's a mature buck.
Yeah.
They were coming and crushing that scrape, but it was just because it was in like the key travel corridor from bedding up the ravine down into these fields where they're likely feeding.
Mm-hmm.
Yep, that's what I'm saying. But then there's that period in October where, in my opinion and experience, where I think they go out of their way. There might be a half portion of the day or longer where a buck is thinking of all the scrapes that he usually hits in a certain area, and he's just making his rounds, checking and working all of them. Like that's where you're seeing some of this activity peak and drop off, because it's more of like a rut type scenario, at least what I'm seeing.
Are you going around and putting scrapes in this time of year, like licking branches?
Yeah, I still do. Or, a lot of my spots, it's funny this year, I might not have tied a lot of them up good or what, but a lot of them did not hold up, and usually they do. But I'm repairing a lot of them. Like if there's no licking branch, you might as well forget about it, honestly.
Sure.
I don't do a lot of it when there's snow on the ground, because you can't see like, trails and deer traffic as well. I kind of relate more to because when the snow melts in the spring, then you can see what the deer did last fall.
Mm-hmm.
That's when I really will put out a ton of my mock scrapes. It just seems like that sign and that travel evidence is way easier to see at that time of year versus anywhere else. That's when I'm putting most of mine out.
Do you feel like you've got the scrape process like perfected?
I mean, I'm not bragging at all. I don't know if I want to say perfected, but very confident in it.
I mean, are you bottling your pee for sale yet, or?
Well, to be honest with you, I'm even doing less and less of that. You guys might have seen in some of my spots, like I'm hanging on mainly just beech branches.
Yeah.
I love using beech branches over just anything else. And, this might just be more in my area, but I did a few test mock scrapes because everyone's telling me to use vines, and I see a ton of people having success with them. But I did in 3 different spots a beech limb and a vine, like on a double mock scrape, 3 foot apart, and the beech limb crushed the vine. Like most of the bucks never even touched the vine.
Interesting.
And it might be because we don't have a lot of grapevine here.
Sure.
Maybe they're just not quite familiar with it. But way more success with beech. Another thing too that's kind of funny is like I'll go through a lot of areas, on this public land. I'll see like, gee, I see a beech limb hung there. Then I'll see tied up, and it's not mine. So apparently a lot of people listen to these things, and which I think is great anyways. But I think a lot of other people are starting to have success with the beech limbs too.
Yeah, I see that a lot, at least in the big woods that I hunt where I've got a lot of beech. I've seen those have significant scrapes. I've also seen
son of a beech.
Those smaller beech trees often being the ones chosen to rub on as well for whatever reason.
So what kind of tree is a beech? We don't have
American beech. So like
is it a softwood?
Smooth bark, softwood.
Like a maple? Maple?
Yeah. Closer to a maple, but also beeches will hold their leaves a lot longer into the season. So, and they all, and again, in certain years, the larger ones produce a beech nut, which is, pretty desirable by deer, for sure desirable by turkeys and grouse. And so your American beeches, and a lot of times when you see an American beech, it's a large gray smooth bark tree.
Right.
That's and it has a ton of branches hanging off of it usually.
So
one thing, if you don't mind, I'll just add about beech limbs. And when you brought up the leaves hanging on, is if you look from a distance and you just hang like a limb or a vine with no leaves, and then you hang a limb with leaves from 100 yards away, a deer will see that better. Like they see, there's just more of a visual standout. And I've seen it in my tree stands before. Like that buck was nowhere near downwind of that scrape, but he saw that vertical beech limb vertical limb, that looks like it's naturally broken and like, a scrape, and they'll come into that because they saw it versus just going through the woods and smelling a scrape. Like they're very attracted to that type of feature just for the fact that it's, it sticks out like a sore thumb. They're using their eyes to find these scrapes just as much as their noses.
So here, Steve, I'll get vulnerable with you for a moment. And I'll share with you my my tried and true scrape. I have like a process that I think I feel really strongly about, and I'm open to critiques. So if you think it's shit, you can tell me. But so what I do is I'm not as particular about the type of tree. I don't think it's more to do. It's like location. It's got to be in the right spot, and there's got to be a limb that will work. And sometimes I'll go high if I have to and break something. I'll bring it down. I get them eye level. Typically, I want kind of the bottoms of the the twigs eye level. And I try to find something, first of all, that's sturdy, so it won't break off. It's got to be like fixed in place. And what I'll do is I take all the limbs. So like a lot of times it'll be a small oak, or it'll be like a maple tree. The only ones that I avoid are what are they called? Like they're splintery trees. They have sharp
like
needles
locust.
and stuff on them.
Locust trees?
Well, we don't have any locust trees, but I don't know what they're called, but prickly trees. I stay away from prickly trees. And so what I do is when it's eye level, I take all of the limbs, usually they're just like, finger diameter type stuff. And I twist them all up like as much as I can. And so I turn something that looks like this into this, and it's crazy. And then I'll take a machete or like a small rake, and I'll just like rake the crap out of it. I get it's usually a soft bark. So I get it like peeled open, half the leaves are off. And it's an eyesore. It really sticks out. And then I just tear the crap out of the soil beneath it with like ideally a heavy duty, like a rock rake. And I've been topping the scent off. I actually legitimately have been having a lot of luck with the Tingley's preorbital. I'm sorry, Smokies.
Oh, okay, yeah, yep.
And I don't do anything to the dirt. I just it's just there. So.
I think it's a great idea. And actually, that's what a lot of my mock scrapes kind of eventually turn into. They get so beat up, they get all twisted up. And just how you said, I think that definitely the more attractive, the more well-used you make that scrape look, I think the more interested, especially a mature buck, is going to want to come check it out. So
I think
it's a great idea.
I make them like obnoxious. Like it looks like a Tyrannosaurus Rex has been like just shredding that licking branch, and they love it.
I think one of the things too, I think the visual point that you made, Steve, is a really good one. Maybe, if a deer's cruising a field and it's an edge, like I think the position and heck, you go around and cut every other limb and leave one down. Like it makes sense. Yeah. But if they're walking through the woods, there's usually quite a bit of options on that. I think the other one that I've seen a lot for whatever reason on the mature buck side, especially, is like deer that, like if I'm hunting a scrape, which in October I usually am or damn close, I've seen these bucks like work those scrapes downwind, and like as clear as it would seem that deer should come in and crush that thing, they just don't. And then normally I'll get a picture of them like later that night or whatever it might be, working that scrape. But for whatever reason in those daylight hours, it's almost more that they're scent checking it. And then like under the cover of night, they're like, all right, now I'm going to get up in this thing. And if you look at some of the research, like, I mean, most of these scrapes are getting crushed at night, for whatever reason. But I do think that the's quite a bit of them being scent checked during the day. It's just, if you've got that camera on that scrape with a 30-degree angle of view, you're not seeing them sneak back behind you and scent check that thing.
You're absolutely right. And I was even in spots trying to figure out the predominant wind and try to point those cameras in the right direction to catch that type of activity. So that's a no doubt, like, that's not just a something that you're just making up. Like,
you've probably seen it too. Like, I mean, think about like northwest or southwest wind. Like, the wind's gonna vary throughout the month that you're watching that scrape. We've all probably seen that buck in the background, and you're like, there he is, and it's just like, he didn't come and hit it. Like, and you almost like question, like, he saw it, he did, or he's been there before. And then sometime later in that evening, he's in there crushing it.
Did you have much success with that? You said you've run cameras trying to pick deer up downwind of it?
Absolutely. And even the deer that you hunted, that big 9, I did that to him the year before, and he was way less active at the scrape, but he would want to come in. You could tell, he was just circling a lot, downwind. Even the one time he was staring at it, and you could slightly see he was staring more at the licking branch than at the camera. And I think he just stopped to get a little whiff at it and then just went by. Man. Like, think about like certain, periods of the rut where he's more interested in finding, that next hot doe.
Yeah.
He's probably thinking, well, if I'm going to at least maybe pass by that scrape 15, 20 yards, but doesn't mean I'm really interested in hitting it unless I smell a hot doe there, or maybe another mature buck that might be a competitor of mine. Like, I think there's just certain situations their noses are so powerful that they don't have to really go and work the scrape unless they want to put their own scent on it.
Yeah.
And wouldn't they, though? I mean, you'd think so.
I mean, I think, again, that's the social aspect of this stuff that we don't understand.
Do you think they can differentiate all the different deer that are hitting?
100%.
I agree too. You got to watch. Maybe you guys already did, but I'm telling you, that video I posted today of that buck.
I just watched
another
that,
buck. Yeah. Oh, did you? Yeah, another buck came in like, I don't know, 4 or 5 hours before that, and you can literally tell that he wasn't just scraping that dirt to put his own scent down. Like, he was getting that deer scent out of that scrape, and he smelled it afterwards to make sure most of the scent was gone. Like, they totally know, how. He wouldn't have done that if he didn't feel he had an intruder. So they definitely know that.
I had one camera on a scrape, and I don't know, there was probably 12 or 13 different bucks that hit this thing. And I want to say 3 of those bucks were either 4 or 5. And most of the bucks that were 1, 2, and 3 would come in and, they'd work the licking branch and stuff, but, and maybe pod a little bit, but nothing like crazy. Those 4 and 5-year-olds, and it was only during October. Once it came out of October, you didn't see it, but they would, all 3 of them, I mean, would absolutely drop, a gallon of piss in the scrape, and they would all, I mean, work that thing to where you could see the dirt slinging behind them. But those other bucks were they're just kind of there, just, probably putting their preorbital or forehead gland on the licking branch. But those other bucks, I mean, they were trying to make sure that scent in that scrape was like well known that they had been there. And you could see that on multiple scrapes on the property. And then once you get to that part, like right around Halloween, maybe even right before Halloween, like I would see them bump a scrape, but they never were as aggressive on that scrape as they were from, October 13th to the 25th. Like, it just seemed like at that time, that is the hierarchical, structure layout. Once you get past that, doesn't mean they're not going to fight or doing, but I just think that they kind of know it's kind of been worked out at that point. And, at this point we're trying to breed, but before that, man, they're just jostling for position in that herd dynamic.
Yep. No, you couldn't have said it any better than that. And even when you guys were coming up to hunt, like, remember I said, I think our best game plan, and I was hoping you'd be on the same page. I said, we're going to hunt these hot scrapes. And we had the deer that we wanted coming in at night. And you're assuming, like, with the weather and based on time of year, that something was going to show up in the daytime. That didn't happen, but that is the time of year to be hunting those scrapes. Generally, you're going to see some real good mature buck daytime activity that time of year, that 13th to 25th period.
I almost have to wonder too in those situations, Steve, based on kind of that observation, if let's say, especially because like we were hunting mature deer, like it wasn't like, hey, let's just kill the first 3-year-old that we see or something. If another mature buck doesn't come and visit that scrape, then why in the hell would he get up and go and spend the energy and time to do something at that scrape? You know what I mean? Like if he's already visited it at night and between, night to night, essentially, those daylight hours, no other deer comes and tries to mark its territory in that scrape during October. Why get up and have to go and do it?
That would be interesting. I don't know if you could go back and look at like scrape frequency and how it was like
triggering,
affected by other deer hitting it within a certain period of time.
That really is a really good point that you brought up, because I was going to bring this up earlier, that in the past 2 years, because I'm a huge scrape fanatic and have had a lot of success, but in the past 2 years, I haven't had and seen as much of that consistency. But what I've also seen the past 2 years is like more mature buck isolation. Like a lot of years you might have 3 or 4 mature deer in like, I don't know, maybe a couple hundred acres roughly. I mean, it varies at times, but it just seemed like there was a mature deer on this ridge, and then 2 or 3 ridges over, you'd have another mature deer. And it kind of makes sense. Like maybe I haven't had those consistencies because they didn't have the competition.
It's not as much overlap. Yeah.
Because another thing too is when you have acorns, that pockets more deer into areas, and that's when I've had my best success on scrapes, those acorn years.
Sure.
But you're getting more than one mature deer coming in there to feed. Plus you got a lot of does around.
Yep.
So that's a really good point. And I mean, if anything, I think I've learned something today too. So
well, I think it just comes down. I mean, again, these are the social aspects that the three of us, as well as a lot of people listening to this, drive themselves crazy over. Because like we have no idea what the deer are thinking, but you just have to imagine in that October period, those deer are doing that to mark a territory, to set a hierarchy up in that herd dynamic. And if I go and I work a scrape and I lay my scent down and I go back to bed. And again, from a scent check situation, no other deer has visited that scrape. Why come and work it and do all that again, unless I'm getting closer to the end of October when it's more of I'm trying to attract a doe to that scrape or let her know that I'm in the area.
Think about it like running a trap line. You know what I mean? Like you go out there, like you ever run a trap line, Steve?
Years ago, yeah.
Coyotes or fox or whatever. You go out and you the first time around, you set all the traps.
Yep.
You dig out the trap bed, you dig the hole, and you're on it. You're in there, and then you back out. You don't ever go walk back up to or mess with it, until you see that it's been
set off,
messed with. You kind of drive your truck, get the binos out and check it. That'd be our version of smelling
Which
it
would
from
be
downwind.
Why I wonder, like that buck that you were hunting was scent checking that thing. If no mature buck that he felt threatened by had hit that scrape since he had been there, then he's probably like, still me, right? Still me on top type of thing.
Interesting.
And also in 2021, although that's when I had success on a scrape, but that was November 6th when it was just mainly does, a lot of doe activity at a scrape. But I think because I had that consistent doe activity, that's what brought that buck there, because he was communicating with does. But you talk about that October phase, I think, you're right. If you don't have the right competition and that buck, doesn't feel like he has much to worry about in his core area or even some of his breeding area, probably not going to hit scrapes as much.
I think that's one thing that this time of year that a lot of people might overlook is, you can learn a lot from scrapes right now. Like that licking branch is still there, unless it's one you've been monitoring constantly. Like I know when I go out, because honestly, I think at least where I'm hunting in Ohio, a lot deer are bedding a lot differently than they do during October, November. They're just basically get as close to this late season food as they can, or they're piled into thermal cover. It doesn't, for me, really translate to when I'm going to be hunting them in October, November. But what does is, a lot of those beds are, especially the buck beds where they've really worn them in or where it makes sense from a topographical standpoint, they're still there. And the sign that they laid during those months is still there, whether some scrapes that they got up and hit on the way out or, some rubs that they left right there in the spot. all that stuff to be looking for right now, I think.
Absolutely. No, that's exactly what I'm doing. And if you're not doing it, you're really missing out, because there's so much information to be gathered this time of year. And like I said before, you're having very little impact on messing anything up next season. So, and it's just a great way to keep your mind in tune, your body in shape. I mean, I don't know why someone wouldn't want to be postseason scouting right now.
For sure.
Well, I think that one thing that, people, I don't know if they don't pay attention to it, or maybe they just don't take it serious enough, is, if you're going for a walk in February, you have to think that most of those deer are in some sort of cover, maybe thermals, or they're at least on south-facing slopes to stay warm. But their goal is basically bed food, right? They're thinking survival. That's all they're thinking. And, if you start to look at maybe not necessarily as much where they're bedded now, as much as like where you think that they're going, or where you're seeing tracks in the snow going, or where you're finding that shed maybe on a clear cut or a food source, those same kind of patterns. I mean, as these deer get older, I guess back to what you kind of said there, Steve, is not that they're easier to hunt, but they become creatures of habit. And so if they find reliable food sources, and those same reliable food sources are going to be there come late summer and fall, if it's in the clear cut phase, or, if it's a secluded clover plot or whatever it might be, like ultimately those are probably going to be some of the same things that they look towards, as you approach next hunting season. And if anything, it at least gives you an area to set up a camera and start to see, maybe you come across that deer, and now he's recognizable because his antlers are growing and stuff in the late summer.
Yep. No, I totally agree. And it's, speaking about this time of year, like now's the time of year I think you can dial in a little bit better and, really get to know a deer as good as possible based on those 2, 3, 4 years or maybe longer of intel. I can think of this, one deer I killed, I don't know. It's probably, 4 or 5 years ago, but maybe not quite that long. But I was out, just trying to learn the deer better this time of year. I ended up finding one of his sheds on a certain part of this one ridge that I never even had any pictures or knew the deer really used. And then sure enough, the next season comes and I kill that deer right in that same area where I found the shed. Now, I'm not saying it's always that easy, but it's definitely like I said, what you put in this time of year is going to have a huge impact on going into next season.
I'll leave it with this before I have to go pick up the kid. The one thing that I get the most excited about at this time of the year is that I restrain from going in so many places throughout, probably July to January, and things that like from a terrain, or I wonder what it looks like, or where's he laying. And at this time, you can just go in and know that you're not going to screw anything up. Like it is not going to affect you next year. The memory will be out of his brain by then. But, dive into some of these just gnarly, thick areas that these deer have been laying in and see what it is firsthand, right? Stand or sit in a bed, look out of it. Why is he laying here? You may find a lot of things that you had no idea existed on a property, even if you own a property. That you just, haven't been in. Get aggressive, go in, explore as many deep crevices of the property as you possibly can. And that knowledge is going to help you when it comes back to hunting season next year.
Yep. And one last thing too, I know you got to get going, but I'll add that people should be doing this time of year is, and maybe even a little bit closer to spring, but I really put a lot of cameras out like February, March, April. And it's not so much I'm using that intel then, but I think with a lot of mature deer, I do agree that, sometimes cameras can have an effect on them, but getting those cameras out months in advance, I'm telling you, even if that deer only comes by there, 5 or 6 times before hunting season, I feel like eventually they get more used to it. And if you're not continuously going in there, checking those cameras, putting that scent there, and then just leaving it, based on like, you might find a really good scrape from last year. Put that camera on that scrape this time of year, or a good rub line, trail, whatever. Get that stuff out done ahead of time on some of these mature deer. I'm telling you, it'll have a huge impact going into next season.
I think that's a big one, man, for sure.
I got deer hitting a scrape right now.
There you go.
That's one of the two that I mentioned.
Yeah, I think it's a cool time, and I mean, again, it's been milder winter, so just get out and enjoy it and walk and find some sheds. But well, Steve, I appreciate you jumping on here kind of last minute this afternoon, but I definitely would like to get you back on maybe as we get into that March, April time frame, kind of coming out of shed season, what you found, and then really, that becomes a time frame where I think a lot of people kind of put deer in the back of their brain, but I think there's some really good opportunities there in that March, April, May time frame to take advantage of before it gets too super hot and nasty out.
Absolutely. I'll be ready whenever. Like I said, as long as I'm in your guys' top 3. You see the hat I'm wearing.
I know,
right?
man.
So
You're pulling. You're pulling for us.
Let us know when you're due for another one. I'll get you one sent out.
Are you going to the Great American Outdoor Show?
It's going to be hard to say. It's really tough for me to get far from home this time of year with the weather. If it's real mild, I see for sure that I can get away. I'd love to come down. Are you guys going to be down there?
Yeah, we'll be at the Whitetail Properties booth for a few days.
Okay. Yeah, just text me when you're down there. I'll see if I can make it. But if there's any chance of snow, I'm kind of stuck with a ball and chain.
Very cool, man. Well, we appreciate you jumping on, brother, and we'll catch up with you soon.
All right. Take care, guys. We'll see you later.
The HUNTR Podcast is brought to you by Hoyt Archery.
Dude, where would we be without our Hoyt bows?
Probably shooting crossbows.
or a Matthews, yeah.
One and the same.
Yeah.
But in all seriousness, we love being Hoyt guys because you stand out. When you're in this room full of other people that shoot these other types of bows, I feel like the Hoyt guys just stick out.
Dude, it's just a legit bow. I mean, especially that carbon riser, man. I mean, I know that they've got several other aluminum lines as well, but for me, I'm shooting that RX5 in the carbon model. They've since come out with the RX7, and I can't tell you how much I love being a Hoyt guy amongst a sea full of Matthews guys. So we're out there, I think, proving them wrong, shooting 80 pounds and, killing stuff.
Hey, man, if you want to get serious, get Hoyt. Awesome. Good to have Steve on there, and I figured he'd have some insight. It's kind of funny when you get the right minds in the room, you start to just pick things apart. But I was just thinking, I'm like, why would a big buck waste his time to get back up and go and work a scrape when there's been no other threats to his domain?
If you could change brains with like a deer, a mature buck for one day, or bodies, I mean, like put your brain in a mature buck, or
I was thinking, could I just glue a live streaming camera, like a body cam, to his head and just watch for a day? It would be freaking awesome.
Or a woman is what I was gonna say.
Change brains with a woman?
Mm-hmm. Be one.
Oh,
would you be a buck?
I'd be a buck. I don't want to be a woman. But think about that. If you glued a camera to a buck's head, which PETA would probably have a little fit about, but you could just follow him, like what he would do.
Yeah, well, that's tracking collar. I mean, that's.
Yeah, but no, I want to see what he sees. Tracking collar only goes so far.
I'd choose a tracking collar over camera for sure.
Well, yeah, I mean that would be.
I want to know where he's at, but to literally have to be in his brain.
I wonder how we could do that. Like, what if we wanted to say,
GoPro.
like, hey, we've got farms. Call Bronson and Mississippi State and be like,
dart one.
Hey, could we put a collar on a mature buck on our farm?
Oh, I mean, dude, if there's any possibility of that happening, I'm 100%. Do you think there is? I don't think they just do that.
I mean,
listen, Bronson, we're gonna need a helicopter and we're gonna need some darts, a lot of them.
We could probably buy ketamine on the black market and just hit them with that.
Have darts like doom, 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 doom.
Be pretty cool.
Yeah,
I would assume that you could do that.
We'll check it out. We definitely should.
It'd have to be some part of some sort of research project, which is
sure.
I'm just curious.
The HUNTR Research Fund
Facility fund. We come to your property, we dart one of your bucks, and we put a collar on it, and we track it. I bet it's expensive.
That would be
well, it's
awesome.
Bronson. Bronson's going to come on the podcast here soon. Okay. We'll ask Bronson and be like, by the way.
Yeah, I'd love to know.
If we were to fund this project, could we do it?
Well, we need somebody else to fund it. We need like the state to fund it.
I bet we could find people to fund it. Crowdfunding. Possibly you.
Donors? Possibly you.
So, anyways, it would be cool. But yeah, it's interesting when you get, Steve spends a ton of time in the woods, so it's nice to get his viewpoint on stuff. Also, depressing to see, 2 years in a row, it seems like his activity and stuff has decreased. So, but we'll keep up with Steve on that, and yeah, we'll see y'all next week.
Later.
Take me